Today, we're diving into documentation driven development and how you can quickly create your project requirements using the approach and create a foundation or infrastructure for all of your development. The previous video I did in this series, we looked at these concepts, which is foundational to documentation driven development and foundational to accelerating your velocity when you're using AI driven development. And so the goal that we set for ourselves is 2x speed with higher quality. My notion was that the core skills you need are context management, acceleration, validation, which means it's really accelerating validation. So making it so that you can review what the agents are doing for you as quickly as possible. And then you need to evolve your processes because you are no longer a developer, you are a development manager, and your developer is the AI agent that you're managing. And managing is all about processes. Then we we're looking at context management, and the things you have to be able to let your agent know how to do is what to build, how to build it, and how to know when you're done. We had said this one was optional, but will really allow you to accelerate. If the agent can know when it's done, then it can do more things autonomously. And we're trying to balance our hallucination rate and our ROI, which are, the more hallucinations you have, the more time you spend reviewing, that's going to affect our ability to do 2x with higher quality. My opinion is you could do way more than that, but we're just going to set a pretty modest goal, in my opinion, of doing those things. Now, I've done a little bit of prep work to get us ready to go on this little adventure we're going to take. And what I want to start with is showing you the project background real quick. What we're looking at now is the project requirements. This is how I run a hybrid offshore development agency. I'm a co-founder. We do a lean discovery. Our whole thing is to try and be able to make projects affordable and predictable. And so you have to have a good plan. You have to be able to create that plan quickly and affordably, or you won't get any projects. So the way we do it is we create these design assets in a quick discovery sprint. Our discovery sprint usually takes 20 to 40 hours. It costs like $2,000 to $4,000. So it's not a huge investment. And what our clients get out of that is you'll get an information architecture, which is going to show all of the screens of the application. This is a app for the commercial HVAC space, more specifically MEP, which is mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, for solving the gaps in the commercial software side of it. And so we've designed out the system. There's dispatching, there's a dashboard, there's customers, there's customer locations, etc. And then we have a flow chart which talks more about each user and where those users can do and conceptually what they can do. They can authenticate, they can sign up, there's an onboarding flow, there's a dispatch board, job management, customer management, etc. And then we also provide an entity relation diagram, which, if you've done software, you know what that is. It's all the proper nouns and how they relate to each other. Is it one to many, or is it many to many? Or so an organization has contacts and has properties and has customers and purchase orders, etc. So this is our starting point where we provide estimates, and then we jump into the actual design. And so what I've done so far is I've taken these assets, you right click on them and you say export selection, and you can pick it as different file types. So I pick as a PNG. It takes a little while because this is kind of a big diagram here. And then I save it to my local file system. And I do that for all of the various assets that I've showed you. So you'll save it. And then what I did is I saved, admin, time management, location, et cetera, and I put all of those in a folder on my local computer. And just a pro tip is that when you're doing something big like this flow chart, I actually did each section. So I would do authentication, export, onboarding, export, et cetera. So you export out all your assets. I exported the information architecture. I exported the ERB, put those all in a folder. And then from there, I went over and I switched to, let me switch my screens again. I went to Claude. You can do it in ChatGPT too. And I created a Claude project. I call it my product owner. So the MEP Flow product owner, I put all of these screenshots. And then the other thing I have here, these are transcripts from all of our design calls where we reviewed these assets with the stakeholders. And then the other thing I did is I have the virtual instructions here. So the virtual instructions, if we look at them, they're pretty comprehensive. It goes all through. This is a product owner that is responsible for taking all these phone calls, all these design assets, all these things that we've invested time into creating, and then helping us to create. Initially, we're going to create markdown documentation that will live in our code. And then once we have the markdown documentation, we're going to use, I like using linear. So we're going to use the linear MCP, which is an integration for your agents to create tickets and push them into linear. And in a very quick amount of time, we're going to be able to get this project ready to go. Normally, this takes us a week or two or whatever. We're going to knock this out in this video. So, and again, circling back, this is why I think people get frustrated is they just want to jump into Cursor and just start vibing and start prompting and just kind of have it just never get stuck. You end up with this, you know, you see these videos and they're claiming in a weekend you can rebuild like these really complex apps. That's not what I'm trying to show here. I'm trying to show, as an experienced software craftsman who's built many MVPs, many SaaS platforms, how do I use this tool to increase my productivity by a good bit using like really well thought through processes that are based on my experience of creating processes for my offshore teams, which is a similarly constrained resource that you're trying to manage with offshore developers. You've only got a couple hours a day you can work with them, and you have to make sure that they know what to build, how to build it, how to know they're done, etc. So it's a very similar skill set. So jumping right back in, I use the agents for everything. But again, when we were talking about the core skills that these agents bring to the table, actually, I don't have that on here, but they're really good at writing code, writing documentation, and just writing in general, reading things. These are all the skills that you get with the agents. So take advantage of it. Don't do work that you can have them do. When I was trying to build out this GPT, I'm asking it, how should how should the virtual product owner approach reviewing the call transcripts as they discuss features or et cetera? Right here, I'm getting it to help me build the instructions. And I wanted those instructions to capture that we've had multiple calls and talked about the same feature multiple times. How do we make sure that the agent knows to build out our requirements in a way that reflects the latest update on that feature? We don't want to do something that was on the first call and on the fifth call it had changed. So I've created a process that I'm hoping will help get us there. But if you've worked with AI very much at all, you know that like there's nothing you're just going to give to it and it's going to complete totally. Our goal here is to improve our ROI and X factor our delivery. I've been able to, the last project I did like this was estimated at 280 hours and I completed it in 40 hours. So that's a pretty big increase in velocity there. So let's go ahead and see what we're going to be able to get out of this one. So this is my project, and this is how I created the, just so you know, you click new projects if it wasn't obvious. And that's how you create these. And then you upload the files using this button, and then you add the instructions. And so now we have a product owner who should be fairly well aware of what our project is. So let's go ahead and just ask it. I do want to just do a quick shout out to another tool I'm using. If you don't know what WhisperFlow is, I highly recommend it. Once you start going with AI, your limiting factor quickly becomes your typing speed. WhisperFlow is just a much better way. It's AI for your, it's what Siri should have been 10 years ago. So I'm going to go ahead and use WhisperFlow now to start prompting with the AI. Let's start by listing out the major areas of our application we need to build. And then we're going to start working on our requirements. So there we're using WhisperFlow to save a lot of time on our typing. And I'll go ahead and we just want to make sure that what our app is doing is mapping to our requirements. And so what we should be looking for here is these big boxes, right? So we want to see it calling out that we have dispatching, that we have customer, we have properties, jobs. That's what we're looking for, right? So we're going to give it a minute to crank. Okay. All right. So it's going a little deeper than I wanted it to, but that's not so bad. Core business problem, poor dispatching visibility, job blocking issues, disconnected workflow, limited scheduling visualization, success goals, reduce dispatching time, improve job visibility. So this all looks good. System architecture, primary application, core web app, technician. Okay, that's fine. Core user flows, dispatch management, job lifecycle, technician workflow, customer journey. Okay. Technical specification, um, data model highlights. Okay, it's got a bunch of entities there. Core MVP features, um, dispatch board, job management, customer property management, basic scheduling, technician app. So I know that the MVP is beyond what was actually discussed. Okay, so this looks like it clearly is able to see our requirements and understand them, which was the goal. And now what we're going to do is kind of fine tune it a little bit. So this looks good, except our MVP requirements revolve around just solving the dispatching pain points. Can you review the plan and update our overview to include that the MVP for phase one is just the dispatching, solving the dispatching pain points, and that phase two and phase three update so that phase two contains the overflow work from the MVP, which currently contains more scope than what I just described. One of the benefits of Whisper is that it will take your babble, like I just did, and correct it for you. So give it a minute to figure this out. Okay. It looks like it made the corrections for us. And so we're getting into a better spot here. Now I want to take the MVP feature and start breaking out epics for this particular work. We need to make sure that we include setting up our infrastructure. For this project, we're going to use MakerKit, which is a SaaS boilerplate, and we're going to use the Next.js and Supabase version of it. We're planning to host this project in Vercel. We would need to set up CI/CD and get a walking skeleton as one of our first tasks. Make sure that we can deploy the application to environments. And then once we have a walking skeleton, which would just be, let's say, a health check page. So we'll have a health check page that calls a REST API that would make sure that we can connect to the database. That would be our first feature, and we'd want the health check page to return status. Then the next feature we would want is to start working on the actual dispatching. Let's go ahead and just get some very brief bullet points that show proposed epics. And I want to focus on just the bare minimum things we need to build this without painting ourselves in a corner. And I don't want to gold plate the tickets or the infrastructure. Ask any questions that are necessary for you to complete this task. I think it's good to ask it to ask you questions, but it's also good to let it know. Keep it to things that we really need to know, because the AI agents will ask you a lot of questions, and they will gold plate. And that's where, looking at our core board here that has, the things we're trying to do, this ROI is something you need to always be thinking about. And once you start using AI tools, you get very bold about the things you want to try. And you just got to remember, like, I'm trying to get this done faster with better quality. Am I gold plating and overbuilding and getting myself into some things that are going to end up making me take longer? So, coming back to our product owner here, let's see. Perfect. Let me break down the MVP dispatch focus features into development epics. I have a few quick questions to ensure structure is correctly. Quick clarification questions. Environments. Do you want dev staging prod or just dev and prod for the MVP? I'm going to say dev and prod. Definitely until we start having demos and stuff like that. Yes. We'll use MakerKit for now. Health check scope for the REST API. Health check. Do you want just database connectivity, or should I also verify other services? Database for now. Should I plan for the full data model from earlier analysis, or start with the minimum tables needed for dispatching? Minimal tables. And just so you all know, a MakerKit is the SaaS starting. Like I said earlier, my focus is on affordable, predictable custom software. That's what our agency does or tries to do. So, we try not to build when we can buy. And MakerKit is fantastic starting point for SaaSes. And you can kind of pick the stack you want. I like to go with Next.js and Supabase. And basically, what Supabase is a Postgres. It's a managed Postgres database that gives you essentially free CRUD on your entities, which means that you can read, write, update, and delete entities, and you just define that data model. It's a very productive stack. And if you use MakerKit, it comes with batteries included on all these features here. So you get authentication, you get multi-tenancy, which is kind of a big deal if you haven't done it before. It can take a lot of effort to do that. Billing and subscriptions, customer portal. I have my designers always work in UI, Shadcn and Tailwind, which is very vibe friendly. So when you want to start doing your designs, if you use V0 to vibe your designs, you can have it use Shad and Tailwind, which is going to work really well. So this just has so much stuff built in, and it's, I think, $300. So if you're doing a SaaS, you might want to check it out and just give me a little bit more context about what we're doing. We'll also be hosting in Vercel, which is the folks who make Next.js. Vercel is just fantastic because you get CI/CD, very low effort to get to CI/CD, and you can scale up quite a bit with Vercel. And then we have Supabase, which will be our database, and you'll see how those integrate in a little bit here. And Supabase is, again, a managed Postgres. So coming back to here, now the epic structure gives us clear path from infrastructure to demo ready dispatch solution. All right, here's our epics. MEP flow, MVP, development epics, infrastructure and walking skeleton, get deployable infrastructure with health monitoring, story, setup, MakerKit, Next.js, Supabase boilerplate locally, configure Vercel project. So this looks pretty good to me. Minimal data foundation, core tables, API dispatch workflow. So that's the third epic. Our second epic is minimal data foundation. Third epic, dispatch board core, basic job management, simple scheduling integration. So it did more than what's in the MVP, but I can come back to that. So for now, what I want to do is I want to get I want to get what we're doing here now to where it can be in cursor and we can really get started on this. And I'll show you how my flow snaps together between Claude in the browser, Claude code or cursor. I use both back and forth, um, in your dev environment. And then linear through MCP, which I'll be hitting from Claude in the browser. And I also hit from Claude code or cursor in my local development. So let's go ahead and let it know. This looks good. I want to get this foundational information into markdown files that I can add into my repository as a starting point. Ask me any questions you have about the markdown structure. We're following, it's going to let it know we're following DocDD process. We will have a docs/plans folder where we epics and stories. Docs will contain best practices and requirements, etc. So I'm going to tell it to create a master epic file for now. How do you want user stories organized? C1. Let's not create. Should I have it create the stories? Sure, why not? So thinking it through, we're going to have plans. So part of the process for me is trying to keep things dynamic. And I think I'm going to update this a little bit. Let's change the structure to docs owns requirements, docs tasks as our dev task. And then we'll have docs best practices for what ends up being what I call the AI infrastructure, which is essentially your SOPs, like your development processes. Okay, directory structure, we're going to have docs, requirements, architecture best practices, development tasks, files to create, docs requirement system overview, task, requirements, MVP scope. Should I also create requirements, features, specifications? This is too complex. For right now, I just want you to create a requirements overview markdown file that has all of our features and epics and then stories just as bullet points for now. Or like you've already shown me, the way the stories are broken out, let's just put that in a markdown format and also include the project overview information. Let's not add stakeholders. We don't need that. Okay. This looks good. So now we're in the dev environment. I'm going to create a folder called docs. Within that, I'm going to create a new file called requirements view. Okay. Now we've got our starting point for all of our requirements. The next thing I'm going to do is going to create a new folder here, and I'm going to bring in all of the context from our Claude project, all of the files. I'm just going to copy those over real quick. So we'll call this calls. I shouldn't create assets. So we'll have calls and we'll also have Figmas. So here's our calls and then here's our Figmas. Okay. And then I think I have one more call. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a picture of my folder structure here. Then we're going to go back over to our browser. I've added the requirements markdown document, and I've also added the Figmas that are here in the Claude project and the calls that are in this project into the associated directories under the assets folder. What I want you to do now is help me. I need to create a guide or best practice document. Let's just call it best practice, which is going to be a markdown file that our agents in Cursor, whether we're using Claude Code or Cursor, can use to understand how to look at our requirements document and look at the associated assets and then build out the user stories. I want to make sure that the user stories have the proper level of granularity. So why don't we start by creating a example user story, and then we can go from that to creating the guide that cursor will use to help create the rest of the user stories in our code. All right, so it's doing health check at the API level, and then it's creating the best practices guide. Let's review the. I think this looks like a pretty good functional requirements API endpoint, database connected, disconnected. Okay, this looks good to me. The definition of done, technical notes, reference maker kits, database connection patterns. This looks great, actually. So the fact that the story looks good, I'm going to assume that our user story creation best practices looks pretty good. This is great. They even give you the heuristics for story pointing. Okay, this looks great to me. So let's copy this. This is our guide. Okay. We're going to now create a best practices folder here. The best practices folder is going to have our first document, which is going to be, what did they call it? We're going to call it user story best creation best practices. Okay. Looks pretty good. And so now we're going to fire up Claude. I think Claude, it's the most expensive, but I think it's the best at it. I don't keep up. I'm not trying everything all the time, but I did try a lot of things for a long time. And Claude has impressed me the most. Their agent is better than the others, in my opinion. Let's see. So we're going to move this over to the right here. So what I'm going to tell Claude Code to do is I want to update this document to specify that user stories go in a user stories subdirectory of the docs directory. So they're recommending that we would have epic and then story. Will this structure work if we don't have an epic? Let's change this. I want the folder to be called tasks, and we will either have a single file for the task if it's a story that doesn't need to be in an epic, or we will have a folder if it's an epic, and that folder will contain a README, which would be the description of the epic, and then all of the other files in that folder would be the stories associated with that epic. Okay, so now what do we have? We have docs task, epic, standalone task. Okay, yeah, I think this covers it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of this directory. We'll create a tasks directory. So we've got our requirements overview, which talks about all the features of the application. We've got our assets, calls, Figmas, etc. We've got our best practices, which shows the user stories that we want to create and the order we want to create them in. So now we should be able to, I've got a fresh Claude session here. We should just be able to come in and say, review user story creation best practices. I did a tab to get that autocomplete there. And let's create the first epic in requirements overview. Please preview the epics and tasks you are going to create before creating them. Okay, it's come back. It said Epic 1, Epic goals, get deployable infrastructure with health monitoring, business value foundation for MVP, deliverables / health page with green status when database is connected, individual stories. We've got MakerKit setup for cell configuration, CI/CD, health check page, health check API. I think this looks good. Let's create this, except we should create 5 before 4. So we want to create the API before we create the page and have the page from 4 call the API from 5. Okay, so if we look now, it's created our folder for infrastructure walking skeleton epic. Okay, and then it's suggesting to create the infrastructure walking skeleton epic. I had asked it to add an epic suffix to make the files easier to find. take a quick look at that. I'm using Command Shift V to pull up the preview, and I believe it might use a plugin for that. Um, but we have established the foundation. These are the other stories it's going to create. That looks pretty good to me. Let's go ahead and tell it we'll keep that. Okay, here's our first story. MakerKit setup, functional requirements, technical requirements, definition of done. Looks pretty good. Okay, so it's done now. It's created all of our stories. Let's go ahead and do a wide view with a split screen. Then we can just look at them. Here's a CI/CD story. We can fine tune these as we work on them. But it looks to me like it did a pretty good job here. Yeah. So I think we're in a great starting point here. You're probably getting the feeling for why I call this infrastructure. It's like you're creating context, knowledge base, whatever you want to call it, for your AI agent, so that whenever we are going to, if you watch the first video, I talked about how we treat the agents like they're robots. And we want to be able to, the more things that you tell an agent, like your hallucination rate here, more questions, lower accuracy, right? So, how do you beat that? Well, the way we beat it is by when we get done with a task, for example, the one we're working on right now, if I want to create my second story, I shouldn't just jump in and create it. I'm sorry, my second epic. What I should do instead is I'll come in here. I'm just letting it finish it up. Sorry. I'll come in here and I will tell it, I want to create the second epic now. Which epic should that be? It'll tell me. I'll say, okay, give me a prompt that allows me to, in a new session, create the second epic following our best practices. So it changed all that. And so what we'll do, let's go ahead and just do it real quick so you can see what I'm talking about. I want to create the next epic. Please recommend which epic that should be. And then what I want you to do is give me a prompt to allow me to continue in a new AI session, which will reference our documentation and have the context it needs to create the new epic following our best practices. Now, what we're doing is we're telling this agent, you've done enough today. Thank you for your service. We're going to shut you down. Let's go ahead and have you give instructions for the agent that is going to come behind you. So it's going to give me the prompt. Here we go. Next epic is right there. So then if you use Claude Code, what you can do is you can also use the compact command. Whoa, that's not what I wanted to do. Let me see if I can. Okay, I escaped it. So compact, what that means is it's going to take your current context and compact it down so that the next agent understands what you were doing. But you can give it instructions on how to compact it. So I'm going to say compact. Focus on giving the information that's needed for creating our next epic and not the information about the epic that we've already created or any of the other information that it wouldn't need to create the second epic. So then that's going to compact us and give us a new session. So now our context is going to be much smaller, which means hallucinations will be less, accuracy will be higher. And then I'm copying out this right here. Notice my text is small. So I'm copying out my text here. So now we're in a new session that's been compacted. We paste in the this prompt here, and that's going to start working on minimal data foundation epic. And so there's a good example of context management, then using the agents to do things that you don't feel like doing, right? Like I don't feel like creating this big prompt to tell you how to continue the work. Based on the context and requirement overview, I recommend Epic 2. We are in the new session. Go ahead and continue with the work. So you got a little confused there, but you get the general idea. So I'm going to go ahead and let that crank. And then that's going to wrap up this video. And the next video, we're going to actually start coding and we'll start working on this first epic that we created here. Thanks for tuning in.